A very warm welcome to attendees of the World Water Week, dear friends and colleagues interested in WASH and gender, dear ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this talk show with experts who will share today why water, sanitation, and hygiene is a critical enabler of gender equality and women's empowerment. Around the world, 1 in 10 people do not have clean water close to home. More than 1 in 5 people do not have a decent toilet of their own, and almost 1 in 3 people lack soap and water for hand washing at home. Significant evidence and decades of experience has shown how women and girls are to a much higher degree affected when communities lack clean water. Also lacking decent toilets, good hygiene, and also climate change is exacerbating those challenges. Women and girls bear the brunt of inadequate WASH services. Often it remains that gender and WASH are treated as 2 separate aims within companies. However, there is a real benefit to bring these 2 together. So that is what we will be discussing today. And my name is Åsa Wallin, and I will be your host today. And with me here on stage, I also have Madhu Rajesh, Senior Director, Water and Agriculture, Coca-Cola. Michael Alexander, Global Head of Environment, Diageo. And Catherine Farr, Senior Policy Analyst for International Climate Action at WaterAid. Catherine, if we start with you, could you explain a little bit more about how WASH and gender equality are linked?
Happy to, thank you. When we talk about the SDG 6 and the goal of creating water for all, that obviously includes women and girls. And it's really important because one of the things that we see is having access to WASH and those basic services allows women and girls in so many situations around the world to be able to do more and empower more. So if you go to our WaterAid booth today, you can pick up a full jerry can. And I challenge you to walk up and down that hallway carrying that. And yet we know that women and girls carry that water back often over a kilometer to get home. It's a physical strain. It's a massive time constraint. It keeps them from other things that they need to do. We also know that women are the primarily unpaid caregivers when families are ill. So when we have waterborne diseases, which are going to increase because of climate change, it is the women who will have to figure out how to take care of those family members. When the healthcare facilities are running out of WASH because they've been damaged from climate change, they will have, a lot of the staff are women, they will have to figure out how to get water to those healthcare facilities, and it just goes on and on and on. We see a lot of girls who can't go to school once they reach puberty, at least once a month, because of lack of ability for menstrual hygiene. So it continues and adds and compounds every day, and being able to have that access then empowers girls to be able to go to school, women to give birth safely, women to be able to better care for their families and use the time that they get back hopefully in a variety of different ways that could include economic gain for their families.
Thank you. Michael, why should companies take an integrated approach to WASH and gender equality and women's empowerment?
Well, perhaps I'll just start explaining who Diageo are very quickly. We're a global alcohol company with operations in about 30 countries, and we make brands like Johnny Walker, Smirnoff, Guinness, and Baileys, and Tanqueray, and others. So we are operating and making beer and spirits in many different parts of the world, many water-stressed parts of the world. We also, like every other company, have 2030 targets. So we have a big ambition for the next decade, the Decade of Action, the SDGs. And we have very strong gender diversity inclusion targets around our leadership, around our employment, around even so far as the females behind the camera for our ads. So we're pushing all of this and pushing the minority representation as well. And we have a water program, right? So we have a strong water program, as you'd expect, but where we have the sweet spot, if you like, is combining our commitments around gender and our commitments around water in the context of providing WASH. And we know it unlocks so much potential for those communities. Say they are cultural rural communities that we were talking about that have long time fetching water. If we can unlock the potential by providing WASH, addressing all the issues that you mentioned, we are actually making those communities more climate resilient, as has been explained. But by making those communities climate resilient, we're making our business more climate resilient. And so there is a business driver to it, and that's really important. It's not philanthropic, it's not discretionary, it's absolutely a must to address that climate risk that we have in our supply chains. And we know that women are disproportionately affected by lack of access to WASH, as we just heard. So we need to tackle that head on. And we can combine our gender program with our water program, our WASH program, and combine those two to have a win-win. And that's really not about making us feel good about ourselves, but is about making our business more resilient, making those communities that are supplying us with raw materials to our breweries and distilleries, making them more resilient. And I think that's absolutely key. So the business case is very clear to us, and it's very compelling.
Thank you, Michael. Catherine, over to you again. We've known for a long time that women are to a much higher degree impacted by lack of WASH, and many WASH projects already count the number of women benefiting from the projects. Is that enough?
Absolutely not. We need to look at the specific needs of women and girls in projects and how we can enhance their agency. One of the challenges is that people think, I've done a WASH project in a community, therefore everyone in that community has access to WASH, but it's not the truth. And actually what we need to be doing is, if you want women and girls and gender minorities and everyone in that community to actually have access to WASH, to move forward on SDG 6, then you have to ask, what are the specific needs of women? Because women are not a single group. Menstruating women have different needs. Women who are pregnant have different needs. They actually need more water. And a lot of those women who have young children will need more water because they're lactating. Menopause is a completely different situation. When family members are ill, you need more water for hygiene. And the list goes on and on. So every time we're looking at different situations, we need to bring these women in. We need to hear from them what the challenges are and how we can design systems for them. We also need to make sure that as we're doing this, we're doing it in a way that doesn't add burden to the women. These women have a lot on their plates. They've got a lot to do. We can't ask them to just come to another meeting. We need to find a way to hear their voices that empowers them and really brings them agency.
Thank you. Madhu, how has the Coca-Cola company embedded gender equality and women's empowerment into your WASH strategy and your WASH projects?
Thank you. Great question. So, like Michael explained, the fact that women are disproportionately impacted by water is something that many companies are aware of and incorporating in their corporate water stewardship strategies. And similarly, for us, the focus on gender and women in WASH has been a long-standing focus as part of our commitment to water, going back several decades now. I'll give you a couple of tangible examples of historic work that we've done. So in 2009, the Coca-Cola Foundation, backed by a $65 million commitment, launched a program called Replenish Africa Initiative, which worked across 4,000 communities across 41 countries in Africa, with a particular focus on women and girls. And the program overall provided access to about 6 million people across Africa to water and sanitation and hygiene facilities. We studied the impact of the program specifically on economic empowerment, and we learned that about 400,000 women and girls, in addition to having access to WASH, also benefited from the economic empowerment component of program, because they were able to save the time that they would spend collecting water and divert it towards economic activities like starting up businesses, like taking up a job, or other economic activities. So that was a key component for us. Then in 2018, the Coca-Cola Foundation partnered with the Global Water Challenge, Ipsos, and the Water and Development Alliance to study the impact of WASH on economic empowerment, specifically of women and girls, and launched a study called the Ripple Effect Study, which was piloted across 3 countries. And we learned that there are many economic pathways for women and girls through access to WASH. They also benefit from safety and security, nutrition, and education benefits. So there were many learnings that came out of it for us. And on the back of the study, a ripple effect toolkit was developed that really looked at how do you incorporate gender outcomes into WASH programming and build in specific indicators to measure the impact of the programs. And that toolkit has been used by our teams and our implementing partners to build in programs that are more gender sensitive, but equally it's been used by other companies as well. This learning, long-standing learning that we've had from our programs on the ground has fed into our 2030 water security strategy that has a specific component and commitment around gender-sensitive WASH as an integral part of our community WASH work, as part of our community resilience, climate adaptation and recovery work. So it's built into the strategy. And to talk about how we are building on it going forward, in Latin America, we are about to launch a program called Allies for Water, which will work across, I think, about 12 to 14, I'm sure I've got it wrong, but 12 to 14 countries and reach about 2 million people through WASH Access. And we are working very closely with partners to implement the Women for Water's gender framework as part of designing our WASH programs, and there'll be a focus on 3 key critical components around economic empowerment, health and well-being, and resilience for women. So this is how we've approached our programming. We obviously have a lot of learnings from the ground to share, and that's why we partnered with WaterAid on the report that we are launching today, so that we can share some of the learnings that we've learned, that partners like Diageo and WaterAid have learned, and share it with other companies or with NGOs as they design WASH programs. So hopefully that gives you a flavor.
Thank you, Madhu. Michael, what would you say to a company looking to embed gender equality and women's empowerment into their WASH strategy? Could you give some good advice?
Yeah, I recognize every company is different and every company has a different priorities, but I think we've explained in the report, definitely explains the why, the rationale, the business case. So I think the why is very clear and unequivocal, and we've just talked about that. I think more difficult is the how to embed it, how to integrate it within your programs and how to make it effective. What I would say is don't let perfection be the enemy of action. So set KPIs, set a target, try to embed that within your programs, choose the right partner. None of us are WASH experts. The WASH experts are WaterAid and all the other very well-respected NGOs out there that can help you implement. So I think it's really important to get the right partner firstly. Set yourself a target. Start very simply. So, for example, at Diageo, our KPI is to insist that at least 50% of the water committees represented are female. Right, so that's a very basic. It's not an outcome. It's not an impact. It's just an output. So it is basic, but it's a start, and it's a start that we can continue to measure consistently across all our programs and hold our programs to account to say you have to do this. So it's setting a bar for them to deliver. I do think it is difficult to try and make sure that you're not over-engineering it. You can spend a lot of dollars looking at the impact and everything, but you need to be integrated. So I think it's really important to integrate it in your existing programs and existing structures rather than create a new industry about it. Because actually it should be pervasive not just in water and WASH, it should be pervasive in everything, shouldn't it? And that's what Diageo is trying to do. And we're doing it in WASH because it's super important for the reasons why we've described. And then we believe it will make our program successful if we get the right gender representation, the right gender impact. And with that will come training. Just don't assume by making 50% of the water committee female that it's going to happen, that gender empowerment is going to happen. Yes, WASH will help, but we've got to train as well. We've got to educate, we've got to change behaviours and be sensitive to local cultures. So I think the how is definitely more tricky. The why, as I said, is very compelling. The how is more challenging, but don't let that stop you because there's lots of help out there, and the report is a superb extra step and good guidance. And then there's a WASH for Work initiative as well. So that's a kind of group of like-minded companies and NGOs working together to try and push more investment in WASH and for corporates to understand how they measure the progress and impact they're having.
Thank you. And Catherine, it is a special day, right?
It is a special day. And
why are we here?
We are here because we are launching, Coca-Cola, WaterAid and Diageo are launching the Integrating Gender Equality into Water Sanitation and Hygiene projects. And you'll notice that we've got two different documents. So one is guidance for companies, which answers the question of why. We've been talking about it for the last 20 minutes, but the second one gets to Michael's point of how, and it's really, there's a lot to take in. There's a lot to think about. You know, as you were saying, it's not just the wash service itself, it's not the taps and the toilets, it's the entire system. It's the governance, it's the regulations, and how does one company, how does one NGO, how does one community fix that? And we are hopeful that the how guidance can help NGOs working with businesses like Coca-Cola and Diageo to kind of answer that question and figure out a starting path to really make a difference.
And how would you recommend working with this?
So I think we would all be interested in chatting with anyone who's interested. But again, there's the document for companies to kind of understand the why, and that's sort of the selling point. And then the how really takes you through, these are the components to think about. It's not, first off, do no harm, and then progressively increasing the agency of women as we go up the ladder and thinking about different ways to integrate from the design all the way down to the implementation. So that's the how document. But WaterAid, I'd be happy to talk with anyone in more detail. Mm-hmm. I'm sure y'all would too.
Yeah. And Michael and Madhu, since you worked with these projects, what would you like to point out that you have learned personally? Let's start with you, Madhu.
I think empowering women and girls through WASH programs has many, many benefits, and it's very important to take a holistic approach to designing programs, working with the right implementing partner, but also building in some metrics and measurement indicators that you would want to see in your programs, because what gets measured gets managed. So yeah, that's probably my takeaway here.
Very good. Michael?
Yeah, when I visit these projects, a lot of it's the heart, it's the emotional bit. And you've got to kind of slightly separate that from the mind and the facts and the figures and the impact and the measurement and the reporting and the impact. So it's difficult sometimes when you're in the thick of it and you're experiencing that and you're talking to beneficiaries and women and children that have benefited, and you can see it. And it's, sometimes it's overwhelming. But more importantly, perhaps, equally importantly, is the need to actually kind of make it, programmatize it, if you like, so that you have a framework in which you're operating in terms of embedding gender and impact and replenishment and incorporating that all into one program. And I think that measurement and reporting is important. It sometimes is difficult to sort of contextualize that when you're in the thick of it, but I think it's super important to try and make sure that you can consolidate your information, your impact, and then report it up. And we need to do that consistently, and that's what this guide helps us to do, is provide consistency between different programs and different projects for the NGO implementing partners, but also for those that are reading about it and scrutinizing our activity and saying, well, actually, we're following the guide that's been developed by the experts, and there's a consolidation in itself of all the best practice around. So I think that's why it's so valuable.
Mm-hmm. And Catherine, do you want to add something on this? Is there something you've recently learned that surprised you, or...
So what I will share is an example from our country program. So we've had a long time working in Bangladesh, and Gita Roy, who's featured in this, is a woman who worked with us and a local NGO partner to have a women's leadership on a drinking water facility. And this is an area of rural Bangladesh where women have to not only get their husband's permission to do something, even if it's finished high school, they have to get the elders in the family permission, they have to get elders in the community permission. So there was a long time in getting the group of women an agreement throughout the community that they would, only women, manage this program in a job that, they're managing a business. This has never been done in this community. They've never seen women in these positions. Fast forward a couple of years later, they got the community through COVID because this drinking water facility opened in February 2020. So they were able to provide hygiene and sanitation and water for this community throughout the pandemic. That's a huge thing to be able to say. But from the business case side, actually, the women who've worked on it have gotten profits. Some of them have opened side businesses. They now have been trained on how to have a business plan. How do I have a bank account? They never had a bank account before. They've learned so much, and they're sharing with others in the community, and they're starting new businesses. So there's such a ripple effect, as the Coca-Cola report says from a couple of years ago, that you don't necessarily think about when you're just trying to provide that basic wash. So I think it all really comes together.
Thank you. And if we look forward in a couple of years, what do you hope that we could, what are your goals? What do you hope to fulfill, Madhu?
For us, it's about empowering women through access to WASH as much as possible and making sure we are designing and implementing programs that incorporate the gender component.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
And I think, well, for me, it's about scaling up. We're just two companies and we need to get the message out. We said it again and again, but we need to get the message out that the tools are there, the willingness is there. We need more companies and more NGOs to join forces together to really scale up, because actually on our own, we won't achieve the SDG 6 that we will aspire to. That's the North Star, if you like. And I think without that collaboration and scaling up and selling the message, the ripple effect, if you like, across our industries, across our influencing in countries that we have, the communities we work in and the peers that we talk to, I think that we're failing if we don't do that. So that advocacy and that real call to action is so important, and that's the only way that I think that we'll really get progress towards SDG 6.
And Catherine, tell us some of your hopes.
My hopes and dreams and visions. So I would love for us in 5 to 10 years to have this so integrated that there are no more gender equality in WASH sessions, that every session that talks about WASH talks about gender equality, just like we talk about hygiene, just like we talk about sanitation, that it's so deeply embedded into the thought that actually it's just being done. That's my hope, and I hope that these documents help us as a community move towards that.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And also thank you for listening. And it's also, of course, you can take part of this from WaterAid. Thank you. Great.